Alrighty. Okay. Perfecting video game difficulty. Oh, baby.
I don't know about you, but I've seen a lot of discussion about difficulty in gaming.
Oh,
Perhaps
yeah.
too much for
For the most part, anytime I hear difficulty about video games, it somehow winds up going back to any game that falls under the genre of a Souls-like. Some people are complaining that the game's too hard. Other people are complaining that there's no easy mode. And then you have a very vocal minority of saying the game's too easy in some cases. Like, yeah, I one-shot this boss the first time. I don't know what you're bitch moan complaining about. Yeah, that's just what I hear. As far as like competitive like games go, like FPSs, I mean, I don't really think there's a lot of people complaining about that, really. But I guess you're gonna be talking about what do you call it? Single player experience.
one lifetime. Are games too hard? Are they too easy? Should games have more difficulty options? Less? None at all? There's a million different.
Honestly, I think games should have probably more difficulty options because that opens up the possibility of you having a new a player come into your game. If it's too hard, they can bump the difficulty down and they can cruise through the game at their leisure. And then if they want to, if they think the game is good enough, go back and play it again on the normal difficulty. And then, hey, maybe by that point they have a good grasp of the game and maybe they can replay it again because they got a little, confidence in them. Then they can go back and play it on the hard mode. I don't really see a reason. There's no really good reason to not have a difficulty slider. In the case of the Souls games and the constant trial and error of trying to, read the patterns and dodging the correct way, blocking the correct way, would those games benefit from a difficulty slider? I don't know. Because a lot of the times in the Souls-like games, from at least what I've seen, a lot of the times, and this is just speculation because I haven't really played any of the old Souls-like games, there seems to be like a meta weapon, a meta build, or whatever. If you use this weapon, the game is essentially on easy mode. If you use this weapon, the game is essentially on hard mode. So it's kind of a secondary form of a difficulty slider, depending on what build you use and so on and so forth. So in that respect, it's kind of like a difficulty slider. I don't know, but I'm just ranting in the first 14 seconds of the video. So yeah.
Different videos online that all give their own perspective on the situation, and none of them seem to offer any perfect solutions. You see, difficulty is an incredibly hard thing to get right when creating a game, because you quickly face two massive issues. The first being that everyone who plays a game will have a different skill level going in. The second being that everyone enjoys things differently. So when it comes to games, everyone has a preference for the amount of challenge a game gives them.
Wasn't one of the Final Fantasies that just came out, wasn't there two difficulties where it wasn't even a difficulty, it was just a gameplay option where you value story, so you play on this mode, and then you value gameplay, then you play on that mode. I think that's another good version of the difficulty slider. Just play the game based off of what you value.
Ranging from wanting no challenge at all, to some challenge as long as it's fair, all the way to beating 2 copies of Elden Ring with a controller and a dance pad at the same.
That is actually insane. Did this person do, like, she's got like the dance pad and the controller? Holy shit. That's insane. I don't even have enough brain cells to do this on one game.
Same time. How the fuck? Now, many games have tried their best to accommodate these varying skill levels and perspectives. Multiple difficulty options have existed in games since before I was born, but due to the incredible amount of discourse still surrounding this subject, nothing seems to have perfected it. There's no game that's just gotten absolutely everything right for everyone. And many people would tell you that trying to make the perfect difficulty system is impossible.
Ooh.
But what if I told you they were all wrong? What if I, a YouTuber with just under 100,000 subscribers, was smarter than every game designer on the planet? What if I perfected video game difficulty in this very video?
Oh, dang.
So before we get into talking about difficulty options, I think we should first talk a bit about why difficulty matters. Why do some people care so much about facing challenges when playing a game?
Well, because it offers some sort of satisfaction and fulfillment when you overcome a challenge, in simple terms.
Why do others not care at all? Now, the latter point I've actually covered quite in depth in my video on comfort games. Highly recommend you watch that. In that video, I basically talk about the importance of games in relieving stress and feeling relaxed. After all, these are products of entertainment. They do exist to at least partially take our mind off the real world. And sometimes, after a long day, the last thing you want to do is think. So, you pick up a game like Stardew Valley, and you don't have to. The game lets you play forever.
And this is the perfect type of game if you want to just come home and relax and turn your brain off and just de-stress from your day. This is awesome. It might not be a conventional video game with what you're used to, all right? But these are the types of games that you want to play and just unwind. You know, you don't want to fire up Call of Duty to unwind. You don't want to fire up Apex or Fortnite or CS or Val or any type of high-octane competitive shooter to de-stress. No, that is the wrong mindset. Please, if you're trying to de-stress and play a very high fast twitch reaction time shooter, you are doing yourself a disservice and you're doing everybody else a disservice. Okay, enough said.
Without missing anything crucial, has no game over screens or permanent failure states, it puts up basically no challenge whatsoever, but instead gives you opportunities to make your own. Do you want to make $1 million doing nothing but selling fish? Do you want to marry every single person in the game? Do you want to achieve 100% completion within the first year? Every bit of difficulty is self-imposed, which means playing the game can be as passive or active as you want it to be. Even outside of Stardew Valley, it's not hard to extrapolate that stress-free desire to understand why so many people enjoy easy games and easy modes. Whether it's to play at your own pace, or because you want to feel like a god amongst men, or maybe just because you want to experience the story and not have to deal with the gameplay, you should be able to find something that caters to your interests. The satisfaction of overcoming a challenge isn't the only way that people have fun with games. However, it is a major one. And speaking of that challenge, you have this niche little series.
Well, there's also the fact that you can flex on your bros that you beat the game on Ultra Nightmare, where your friend only beat the game on regular Nightmare, all right? There's that little fact too.
Don't know if you've heard of it. It's very underground and nobody really makes videos about it on YouTube. It's called Dark Souls. The Souls games are notoriously difficult, but that is also crucial to the experience of playing them. As Hidetaka Miyazaki, the president of From Software, once said, "I feel like our approach to these games is to design them to encourage the player to overcome adversity. We don't want players to feel like the game is unfairly punishing, but rather that there's a chance to win a difficult encounter and make progress. We try to design the games to make the cycle of repeatedly trying to overcome these challenges enjoyable in itself." And that's a very important piece of the puzzle here. The best way I can describe most Souls-likes is, have you ever seen that trope in anime or other fiction where the mentor to the protagonist just bullies them to make them stronger? They train them by just fighting nonstop until the hero can finally win. They may even put on the appearance of an outright antagonist and the hero might genuinely hate them, but it's all for the purpose of improvement. They just want to motivate the hero to make them better.
Funny. I was actually going to compare like the Souls games to Super Meat Boy with the whole trial and error thing, because to this day I still have not beat Super Meat Boy. I think I was somewhere around the one of the last levels or something like that. But yeah, I think these are like really good comparisons as far as movies go.
Souls-like games are essentially doing that to you. They want you to beat them and to overcome them in the end, but they want to.
Yeah, and also the game was designed to be beaten, so there is a path to the end. All right, if any of if you thought anything else that the game was really difficult, then the devs could have just as easily programmed all the bosses to just one-shot you, to make all the bosses have disjointed hitboxes, to make it to where you don't even have iframes, and so on and so forth. So with all the Souls games, there is a intended game path so that you can beat the game.
Put up as much of a fight as possible before you get there, so you feel a genuine sense of accomplishment. You've genuinely gotten better than the game and beaten it fairly on its own terms. This is why nearly every Souls-like game starts off with a boss that you're meant to lose against. Whether it's Asylum Demon or Genichiro or that goddamn werewolf, the game opens with an encounter designed to kill you, to show you how hard it can be. Then the setting and the music and the enemy designs all try to paint this picture of an oppressive world that you stand no chance against. I mean, the tagline of Dark Souls was "Prepare to die." It is so obviously trying to taunt you into getting invested in beating it, and then it gives you all the tools to do so. But it never lets up the appearance that it's out to get you, because it knows that that's the best motivation for you to keep going. Seeing a dozen "you died" messages is what makes that eventual victory achieved message so much sweeter. And it's
Isn't this kind of what is it called? Negative reinforcement versus positive reinforcement? Like, you just go against a boss over and over again, and that's like, oh, you suck, you're bad, you're terrible, you suck at the game, you're trash, blah blah blah. And then all you need is that one time to overcome the boss, and then it's all of a sudden it just comes together like, yes, I did it. So I would probably say the people that play these games don't really mind don't really mind negative reinforcement. And there, that's not a good or a bad thing or whatever. But there are the people that are probably complaining about difficulty are probably people that utilize positive reinforcement more than negative reinforcement, I would guess.
At some point, as Miyazaki points out, you start to just enjoy the process of facing these challenges. Heck, almost all of these games even let you come back and fight that tutorial boss again, so this time you can be the one kicking its ass. This, to me, is essential to the design of difficult games. It's why people like them. They want to face an overwhelming challenge and slowly break it down as they improve their skills. With the more overwhelming the challenge, the more satisfaction you feel in beating it. Taken to the extreme, this is why people get addicted to fighting or rhythm games at the highest level.
Oh, yeah.
This is why speedrunners exist. Some people naturally seek out higher and higher skill ceilings so they can work their way up towards them. So in designing the perfect system, I look to these two different perspectives on challenge as a spectrum, where on one end you have something that won't stress you out or give you any problems at all, and on the other you have overwhelming pressure and difficulty you need to overcome. And everyone is going to fall somewhere along that spectrum of enjoyment based on what seems more fun to them. Now, all we need to do to make the perfect difficulty system is accommodate absolutely everyone on that spectrum.
Yeah, easy.
That should be easy.
Yeah.
How long is this video?
Difficulty options kind of
Well,
suck.
we can accommodate different levels of challenge. Like I mentioned earlier, we've actually been doing it for a long time. Since the Atari 2600 at the very least. The console itself actually had physical switches on it that would control the difficulty of the game you were playing.
What? I had no idea. There's no way this is true. Like, game reset, game select, right difficulty, AB, left difficulty, AB. What? Well, this had to have been like so primitive or whatever. Like, what would this do to the game, and what games were utilizing these switches?
Playing. In most games, like Asteroids or Qbert, the easier difficulty would just remove certain enemies or obstacles.
Oh.
In multiplayer games like basketball, it would make one player faster than the other, which is hilarious. Though in something like Adventure, it could change up the enemy AI and make them react to the player differently. However, there was one major design flaw. That being that the switches in the 2600 had an A and a B position. And for some godforsaken reason, they made B the easy mode. They say it's because B stands for beginner and A stands for advanced, but I just don't like that.
Oh my god, I would think that A is easy mode and B is like the hard mode.
Crazy, A should be easy, B should be hard.
Yeah.
Atari, listen, I know you stopped producing the 2600 7 years before I was born, but like, come on. Anyway, since the days of early arcade machines and home consoles, difficulty options have become a staple in gaming and have evolved massively, most notably becoming menu options in games instead of physical switches, which is kinda lame. Easy, medium, hard. That's the usual formula that most games follow.
Yeah.
Choose the amount of challenge you want, ranging from basically none to as much as possible.
Bro, I had no idea that Cyberpunk had difficulty selectors. Or bro, you remember the South Park games with the difficulty selector? It was more easy the more white you are, and harder the more black you are. Oh my god. I don't think that really affected gameplay at all. It was just like a joke they did.
And the game should accommodate you, no problem. Though, while on paper it can sound very good, and like it fixes our issues, it also introduces some new ones. First, just consider the way that games are developed. When making enemies and dungeons and bosses, they will only ever start off with one difficulty setting, and the other ones are added on afterwards. Usually, this default difficulty is normal, though sometimes with Alien Isolation, it's actually the hard mode. But in any case, this one starting difficulty ends up being the optimally balanced experience. And some games will even tell you this when you're browsing the menu. So with additional difficulty options coming later in development, it is incredibly tempting to not put as much work into them as the original intended mode. After all, playtesting is time consuming as it is, and even with just easy, normal, hard, you'd have to rebalance the whole game 3 times over.
Okay, so that's pretty true. Having to make essentially 3 games and just modifying animations, damage, health pools, resistances, and a bunch of other things. Okay, from that perspective, it really seems difficult. But I'm not really here to listen to the woes of being a developer.
Which results in a lot of games not doing that. In fact, the most common way that additional modes are implemented is just static number changes.
Yeah, this is the laziest way.
Enemies do half as much damage on easy or have twice as much health on hard. Again, theoretically this works, but in reality, it usually ends up with some very mediocre results.
Yeah.
If you only change static numbers, an enemy on hard will be defeated the exact same way they would be on easy. It just takes more time because they have more health. What would have been a bit of damage on normal is now an instant kill on legendary, meaning lots of games, especially ones with RPG mechanics like the new Assassin's Creeds, will often have these incredibly tedious boss fights on harder difficulties, where you are just running away from the enemy so you don't die immediately and plinking away at their gigantic health bar for minutes on end. And that's if the game's bosses and enemies don't just break outright from the changes in health and damage.
That sounds miserable as fuck. Like, I usually hate it when the games, like, whenever you bump up the difficulty, it's just, they become damage sponges or whatever. That's always annoying. Like, just do the same game loop, but longer, all right? There you go.
There are so many games where the hard mode just isn't that much more difficult than normal until halfway through, when one boss or section just steamrolls you.
Yeah.
From what I've heard, the Gears of War series on insane difficulty is famous for this. Most levels were obviously challenging, but some of the fights were just in another league entirely. Instant unavoidable deaths, or your companions just standing around getting shot while all you can do is watch. It's like,
bro, I did play Gears of War when it first came out, and then I played like a couple of the sequels or whatever. But I don't remember ever playing on the hardest difficulty. I think I did. And then this happened to me over and over again. And then I think I was just out of it. Like, this is too hard. I poke my head out. I just get insta-gibbed. And this is not fun. This is not worth it. So, yeah, I never beat any of the old Gears of Wars on, like, the hardest difficulty.
It's like you were playing college basketball and every once in a while they just subbed in LeBron James on the enemy team.
Yeah.
More challenging, sure, but in a way that makes you want to quit playing.
Yeah.
On the flip side, some games have the opposite problem, like in Cyberpunk 2077, where pretty much no matter what you do, the final boss will be a complete joke if you've played even somewhat competently up until that point. I mean, seriously, I played the whole game on very hard, completely fucked up my build halfway through by investing deep into hacking and then abandoned that to focus on melee, and still managed to kill Adam Smasher in, I'm not joking, a single hit. I've heard that they're overhauling the fight for the release of the new—
What? I didn't know Adam Smasher was like the final boss. I thought he was just the bad guy in the anime. What the hell?
DLC, but it seems like they didn't even playtest him on any difficulty, let alone hard. Though, all those problems I just mentioned arise from getting lazy, which not every game does. I do have to give credit where it's due, some games do switch up the different modes in order to make things more interesting. In Kingdom Hearts 2 or Ghost of Tsushima for example, the highest difficulty mode actually has all the enemies deal more damage, but increases your damage as well, meaning the game is much more punishing, but also rewards you much more for higher level play. Ghost of Tsushima in particular is amazing for this, because in a game about a lone samurai fighting hordes of enemies, you do feel that in the game's lethal mode. You're always one wrong move away from death, but if you're good enough, you can just cut through everyone like butter. Then, in my opinion, one of the most interesting series when it comes to difficulty options is Devil May Cry. In just DMC5 alone, there are 7 different modes. You've got your easy, normal, hard, which I'll just play with damage and enemy aggression, but beating any of those unlocks Dante Must Die, a mode where all the enemies and bosses have the ability to basically go Super Saiyan. Beat that, and you unlock Heaven and Hell mode, where you and every enemy in the game, including the bosses, die in one hit. After that, you unlock Hell and Hell mode, where you still die in one hit, but the enemies have their hard mode health bars, and then the special edition added Legendary Dark Knight mode, which just throws like twice the amount of enemies at you. That is a lot.
Bro, that is the epitome of that little spectrum that you had earlier of the, I forgot what it was, like super easy and then insanely hard. I had no idea there were this many difficulty doodads in DMC. Holy crap, I still haven't even played this game.
It is an overwhelming number of options.
That's cool,
but the game is designed around them. Devil May Cry's campaigns are only about 10 hours long. You can beat them in 1 or 2 sittings if you really get good enough. So the game uses its difficulty modes as replay value. Beat the game once at a manageable difficulty, go up a level and perfect that, rinse and repeat, until eventually you're good enough at the game to finish it without getting hit. The fun of the experience is that
Bro, didn't Borderlands do that same thing? Yeah, like they did kind of the same thing, but instead of the exponential thing that DMC does, well, eventually Borderlands got a little ridiculous with the exponential difficulty gain. But yeah, like I think so Borderlands 2, you could beat the game on, what was it, regular mode, Vault Hunter mode, or I forgot the names of it. Whatever.
Competitive skill increase, so the difficulty options don't just exist to cater to more players, they are part of the progression of the game, and fit right in with the active scoring system that's already there. But before we can even get to the fun extra options when designing the perfect difficulty system, we still have to fix all the issues with difficulty options as a whole. Like, you know, the fact that in every game ever created, you pick the difficulty option before you start playing the game.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about how weird that is? You don't even know what the gameplay is.
Yeah, you're essentially just gambling at that point. I bet I could beat the game on this mode. I bet I could beat the game on that mode. Yeah.
And you're forced to pick how hard you want it to be. Do you know?
Bro, wasn't it Doom Eternal in Doom 2016? If you kept dying, and I had no idea that this feature was a thing, if you kept dying over and over again on a boss, the game suggests that you lower the difficulty. And when that screen popped up, and I was in a Discord call with my buddy, he just started laughing because I told him what happened. And he's like, "Oh shit, you got the screen." And I was like, "I had no idea this is a thing." So that was pretty funny.
Know how many people picked the Give Me God of War option in God of War 2018 and then got demolished by a mini boss 2 hours in just to find out they had to restart the entire game to lower the difficulty?
Oh dang.
That fucking sucks. Admittedly, most games do let you just flip between all the different options on the fly. Even God of War does this for everything but its hardest mode. But that introduces another problem. That being that many games, most notably big RPGs like the ones from Bethesda, have the player essentially use the different modes like the gear shift on a car. You're dying in one hit on hard mode, slap it down to easy to beat this boss. The next couple enemies barely scratch you, I forgot to crank it up to normal to have some challenge again. The game designer has essentially just offloaded the entire responsibility of balancing the game to the player, which isn't a great solution unless that player happens to enjoy opening the menu every encounter to tweak the...
Yeah, because the player will always take the path of least resistance. Always.
Amount of challenge. Also, what if easy is too easy, but normal is too hard for me? What if I enjoy the puzzles on hard, but not the combat? If you only offer these binary choices, you're always going to have people that fall between the cracks. Some games try to rectify this by just adding more. Shadow of the Tomb Raider even splits up every component of gameplay into its own category, with overall difficulty, combat difficulty, puzzle difficulty, and exploration difficulty, each having toggles from easy to very hard. This is good in some ways. One of the options can specifically turn off the white paint on every climbable surface, which is something that annoys a lot of people. Except, oops, now I have to solve a combination lock in the menu every 15 minutes to try and find the optimal level of balance. No, if we truly want to design the perfect difficulty system, the different modes have to solve all these problems.
But I do like how there is a progression with all these games, and all of these games that you're mentioning have at least attempted to try to fix the difficulty thing without, them having to design essentially 3 different, plus games with animations and, instead of just doing the static numbers and whatnot. So it's like, we're getting there.
They have to actually put effort into every single option so they all present unique challenges and fair balance, but there also has to be enough options that we can still match people's varying levels of skill. But not too many options so that people are constantly opening the menu trying to tweak things. Really, I think we should look into something that can simplify things.
Dynamic difficulty.
Resident Evil 4, both the original and I believe the remake, though Capcom is very tight-lipped about it, features something people have dubbed dynamic difficulty. The game still has a difficulty select screen with a pretty standard selection, but even after you pick one of those options, the game works to modify the challenge as you play. The basic way that it works is that your performance in the game is constantly monitored and measured, using metrics like how much damage you've taken, how many enemies you've killed, and how many resources you've used. And based on how good you're doing, the game will respond by changing the enemy AI, the amount of enemies or their spawn locations, and how much ammo and healing items they drop. So even if you've picked standard difficulty, if you start playing really well and get past enemies without wasting bullets, the game will respond by making them more aggressive and giving you less ammo. Likewise, if you're on hard but keep getting brought down to low health and can't seem to avoid hits, the game will drop more healing items for you and spawn less dangerous enemies. There's definitely...
I actually like that. And because that's really intuitive, because it's simplified and intuitive. And you don't even have to really mess with anything except in the beginning. Like, I want to play on professional. And you boot up the game, and then all of a sudden you're having an off day. And then the game's just like, oh, okay, well, since you're sucking today, we'll give you less enemies and more healing shit. But then, after you find your groove or whatever, the difficulty spikes back up because you're in the zone.
Definitely more going on there, but that's the basics of it. And Resident Evil 4 isn't the only game to explicitly have an entire system built around this. The Left 4 Dead series actually does something very similar. It uses a so-called AI director to dynamically change the difficulty of the game for all 4 players throughout the course of a level, mostly by changing what zombies, weapons, and items spawn where. I don't know what it is about zombie games that makes devs want to go ham with the AI, but between these 2 games we have a pretty good idea for how it works. Though I'm pretty sure there's actually a ton of other games that sneakily add something like this to their gameplay. Even just one interesting example I'm sure not a lot of people think about being multiplayer games. I mean, think about it. If a game has a ranked mode or skill-based matchmaking of any kind, that is essentially a dynamic difficulty slider. The better you do at the game, the higher your rank gets, and the more challenging it'll be because you're pitted against other high-level players. Do bad enough and the game drops you down to a manageable rank with manageable players that should offer an easier experience. We don't often think of multiplayer games this way, but from the developer side, it's their best way of managing challenge in a game where you can't change health or damage numbers or tweak AI. which also means it's now susceptible to things like inting or smurfing, but
and also cheating. Don't forget that one. That's another key one.
that's a topic for a different video. Basically, when used properly, dynamic difficulty is genius, and I really think implementing it is a must if we're going to make the perfect system. It completely solves the major problems of static options in that it makes each of them cover a range of challenge instead of a single narrow band. Theoretically, with enough work put into it, you wouldn't even have to have difficulty options at all. Instead of easy, medium, hard, you could just flip between them on the fly, depending on how the player is doing. That gear shifter of balance would now be working on its own, which would make sure nobody gets stuck with a level of challenge they aren't having fun with. And all of that would massively increase the replay value and shake up a lot of the normal gameplay because you get a different experience with the game pretty much every time. The main downsides of dynamic systems really only comes down to how well they fit into the type of game you're making. Like, you can't really implement something like Devil May Cry's challenge modes because a one-hit kill difficulty isn't just something you can dynamically switch between. And once you do activate it,
and you can easily tell if it's been activated or not. So like if you're gonna cleave through a bunch of like demons in one area and you just one-shot everything, but then the next area the game senses, oh, you didn't take that pack down cool enough, we're gonna make it easy for you since you're not doing so good. And then, oh, all of a sudden I got a triple S combo, and then the next pack is just damn near about ready to one-shot you. That is just gonna feel awkward.
Adding more health drops or gauging how well you do based on damage isn't possible anymore. So while it's not directly related to the rest, there is another implementation of a sort of dynamically adjusting challenge level that I want to talk about. That being the entire genre of roguelikes. Or rather, roguelites. They are two different terms, I do know that. I just purposefully don't care about the difference because genre names are stupid. Listen, no game has been...
Wasn't it one of the difference? The main difference is like, one of them, there is no accumulation stat thing like Hades has, and then the other one, it doesn't have it. Like one has it, and then the other one just doesn't have it. Like, oh, you died like a zillion times, but you accumulate like these little talent points that you can put in these static stats or whatever. I don't know.
Like Rogue since the year 2000. Here's what Rogue looks like. Technically, every game that doesn't use ASCII graphics or a turn-based combat system isn't like Rogue. I know some people get mad about this on the internet, but just like, come up with a better name. We haven't called first-person shooters Doom clones since 1999.
Oh, true.
Anyway, nerd rant aside, roguelikes are a fantastically refreshing take on difficulty, because the genre revolves around randomly generated dungeons, enemies, and loot, with permadeath having you start over from the beginning if you fail. Naturally, this leads to a high degree of challenge and an inherent problem with how you balance things. But many modern installments in the genre have figured it out. Namely, that every run you do into a dungeon can net you some permanent buffs, item unlocks, or skill upgrades. So even if you keep dying over and over again in a game like Dead Cells, you should still be able to gather enough currency to increase the size of your health flask or the quality of the items you'll find, which carries over into the next run. The game is still focused on that permadeath randomization as its core mechanic, but it extends a hand to the player over the course of repeated failures, making sure you at least get a little further each time. Dead Cells then has additional challenges it gives you to move that difficulty in the opposite direction. Harder, optional routes through areas are always available, and there's time doors you can try to speedrun to if the level on its own isn't hard enough. You really have more than enough choice on how you want to tweak the game to find that perfect balance, notably without ever having to touch an options menu. This, to me, is sort of the other alternative to dynamic difficulty, where instead of taking the control completely out of the player's hands, you've now given them all the options to balance things just through the game's own mechanics. If you're specifically struggling with healing a lot, you can upgrade your healing items. If you get stuck on one particular level, you can usually find other ways around it. You don't have to do any of this, but it's all there within the game if you need it. However, we're pretty much there when it comes to making the perfect system. Dynamic difficulty really allows a game to accommodate everyone and feel fresh, on top of whatever balancing and static options we want to add.
Bro, how are you gonna not mention the skulls in Halo? Like, yeah, Halo had that little, what was it, like easy, normal, heroic, legendary, but they had the skulls that you could collect and then turn on and off. Because I think, isn't it to my understanding that whenever you collected all the skulls, they're essentially just little added game modifiers so that you could just play the game over again and turn on like just random things that would make the game just harder, just for the sake of bragging rights. That's literally it.
So why does it feel like I'm forgetting something?
Accessibility.
Hey, remember those 2 issues I brought up in the beginning of the video? Well, up until this point, we've really only focused on one of them. The idea that people enjoy different amounts of challenge. What we haven't focused on as much, and what many people forget to focus on, is the other issue. Everyone who goes into a game will have a different initial skill level. Everyone who plays a game will need to put a different amount of effort in to increase that skill level. Some people might have the physical and mental ability to become good at a game within a few hours, but others won't. Some may not even be able to reach the required skill level the game demands of them at all because of a disability. And it's vital that if we're going to create the perfect system, that we cater to everyone. Now, important note, accessibility and difficulty are not the same thing. They aren't even directly related in a lot of cases. There are many very easy games that are still super inaccessible and vice versa. For example, if you want to play Animal Crossing, but you have some form of visual impairment, get fucked, I guess.
Yeah, because all of the colors are just kind of warm in just how it looks or whatever. I think, wasn't it in some games you have what's that like color option? You have like Tripinopia or something, and then you have like all these other color options to see in different color schemes if you have some sort of like thing going on with your eyes or whatever. And then wasn't it, I think in Batman, like the Batman Arkham series, there was an accessibility option, I think, to either whenever you're doing like a QTE or whatever, you were supposed to like tap a button, but if you were somebody that had some sort of like nervous system thing that made it so that you couldn't tap and all you could do was hold, you could just make it change all the QTEs to just hold the button instead or whatever. So yeah, I'm all for like making the games accessible for the most part.
Because there's literally 0 options to help you out. If you can't read the text the characters are saying, the only audio cues you have are these incomprehensible sounds.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas during the research of this video, I saw someone who is completely blind do a Let's Play of The Last of Us Part 1 because that game adds so many options and audio cues that allow it to be playable. That blew my goddamn mind.
That's
Though,
crazy.
while they're not the same thing, accessibility and difficulty do overlap. Many people have both physical and cognitive limitations that will make games more challenging for them in specific and often overlooked ways, and accommodating them can often affect the difficulty of the game. Some of these accommodations are in the form of particular features, things like disabling button mash prompts or changing certain abilities from holds to toggles. Even aim assist is a great help to those with motor control issues. However, sometimes the best feature that you can give someone in order to accommodate them is a form.
Bro, what a subtle way of just shitting on all controller players ever. Oh my god. I know that's not how we meant it, but that's how I took it.
Of easy mode. If you haven't seen it, there's this fantastic video with less views than it deserves by a YouTuber named Frogwater. In it, he talks about accessibility and difficulty in games through the lens of someone with a relative who is not able to play many of them due to a lack of options. Even the easiest mode for some games is still too demanding. However, a game like Dusk is one of the first shooters that seemed feasible to play because it had an accessible mode built into the game. A significantly less demanding mode specifically added because the game's developer, David Szymanski, has a cousin with MS who they wanted to be able to beat it. And while I brought it up as an example of good harder difficulty modes, Ghost of Tsushima also has a lower intensity option you can choose in its accessibility menu, which forces the game into easy and adds a bunch of features that make it less demanding to play. Some of the unblockable attacks are now blockable, enemies detect you much slower in stealth, all your timing windows on parries are relaxed to let you hit them easier. And not only will enemies stop their combos if they manage to hit you, but they'll also avoid attacking you altogether if you go to heal. That's genius. It makes the game so much more approachable to play and surely less frustrating if you're having trouble. Even roguelikes have somewhat figured out the accessibility issue while keeping...
But what happens when you have all these accessibility players that want to do another one up? they want to do the game with another layer of difficulty or whatever. I mean, I know that's like a minority or whatever, but I don't know. It's a thing.
Keeping their core idea in mind. Hades famously had an option called God Mode that, once activated, instantly gives you 20% damage resistance. This on its own makes the game easier for most, but on top of that...
Oh yeah, not only did this happen to me in Doom, this also happened to me in Hades. Because couldn't you reduce the difficulty in Hades or whatever from, because like you play the game on normal, but then there's just easy. I tried to play the game on normal. I think I have like 23 or 24 hours in the game, and I still didn't beat the game. I was that bad. And then my buddy's like, why don't you just turn it to easy? I was like, I don't wanna. I'm never gonna put it to easy. He's like, dude, I did it. I'm like, you suck. He's like, well, at least I beat the game. I'm like, yeah, that's true.
That every time you die, your damage resistance increases by 2% up to a maximum of 80, meaning that the game can still present a substantial challenge to you, but you're guaranteed to make progress as your skills and the buff keep increasing. The buff just standing in as an additional push forward while fitting right into the roguelike design philosophy. So there isn't any one-size-fits-all, this game is now accessible to everyone option that you can really implement here. But I think if we're going to perfect video game difficulty, it's a must to add in an accessibility option, at the very least. Some form of less intensive mode that can ideally be beaten by anyone. But just like any other option, we can't get lazy here. Just flat stat changes are one thing, but to make a truly perfect accessible mode, you really have to consider the kind of game you're making and the changes that will best accommodate a struggling player. God mode and low
I wonder if he's gonna mention Crab Champions. Probably not. It's like an indie game or whatever, but Crab Champions has a lot of modifiers that you can do to play the game. I think there's like easy, normal, hard, and then nightmare or something like that. And then once you reach nightmare, you have a bunch of other modifiers that you can do, like the money, you have to manually pick up the money instead of the money just comes to you, or just a bunch of other things, because it's another roguelike or whatever. Like, you have a less chance to get the good shit. Certain mobs deal more damage, more projectiles. The mobs can like jump faster at you. A bunch of other things. And essentially, it's called like a diamond run, like a nightmare diamond run. And I have yet to do a solo diamond or any diamond run complete. So that would be cool.
Intensity mode are infinitely better implementations than if those games had just halved the enemy's health bar and called it a day. Also, final note, both Hades and Ghost of Tsushima don't lock you out of certain paths or achievements for picking the accessibility options.
Ooh.
You can 100% both games either way. They do not treat these options as anything other than accommodations. And they certainly don't do the stupid fucking Wolfenstein thing where they call you a little piss baby for...
Can I play, Daddy? Don't hurt me, bring him on. I am Death Incarnate Uber. This is so funny that a dev could do this.
Playing on easy. Like, come on, man. I get what you're going for, but please understand that some people play on these modes because they have to, and calling them little bitch crybabies or whatever is not helping anyone. Anyways, on top of some form of accessible mode,
yeah, but I think the whole Wolfenstein, aren't they like the only game devs to like really do that? So a one-off game dev doing like a ha, it is funny.
perfect system should also ideally include as many individual customization options as possible. The Last of Us Part 1 is a great template to follow here. Button holds, aim assist, toggles for abilities, or options like infinite underwater breath, so those sections aren't as punishing. I shit-talked Shadow of the Tomb Raider's gigantic list of difficulty settings, but in the context of accessibility...
I mean, bro, if you think this is a gigantic list, play Crab Champions. I mean, I get it. Like, I thought this was actually a good idea, like combat difficulty. Like, how do you make an exploration difficulty easy, medium, or hard? Like, what, you add or take away foliage or something? And then I get the combat thing, and then puzzle difficulty I get, and then overall, yeah. I mean, compared to a lot of other games where it's just like one thing where you're going up, 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 like back and forth. Yeah. I mean, I get it.
That's probably a lifesaver. So I'm not going to claim to be an expert here or even someone who's adequately informed. I can't list every possible option or feature that someone might need, but it is important that people are advocating for more options in general, which is why I'm going to finish off this segment by shouting out another creator. This one by the name of Laura K. Buzz. They run a fantastic series called Accessibility, where they review the accessibility features of many games and talk about more necessary requirements in the industry. Even if I can't cover every possible angle of this issue, I trust that advocates like Laura can. And so I think it's important that we listen to them. And I mean, honestly, I'm feeling pretty good about our perfect difficulty system. We've got all the puzzle pieces, now we just gotta fit them together. Implement some static modes that are all fair and balanced and interesting, make them all dynamic and responsive, and add in a bunch of in-game options to tweak them even further. Plus a bunch of accessibility features and modes that can make the game beatable for everyone. I don't really see any possible way that we could fail at this point.
Yeah. Was it the dilemma of perfect difficulty, or why Elden Ring can't have an easy mode? I still haven't played Elden Ring. I have yet to. I'm working on AC6 right now.
Okay, so small problem. How do we implement all of these systems and dynamics and accessibility features we've talked about all in the same game without them?
That's hard. Yeah.
To give an example of what I'm...
Yeah, you want to talk about crunch time with games that only have like one difficulty, and then you want to add like a zillion layers of difficulty. That's some crunch time.
Talking about here, I see there's a lot of argument online about, say, an easy mode in Elden Ring. We are supposed to be accommodating the entire spectrum here. One rather large portion of that spectrum is people who enjoy difficult Souls-like games, which, as I went in depth on earlier, don't accommodate you at all. Another large portion of that spectrum is people who want Souls-like games to be more accommodating, which...
Okay, so there's the people that are okay with the difficulty, and then the people that want an easy mode. Okay. I don't know. I'd probably err on the side of just put an easy mode or whatever. Or if you don't put an easy mode in, I think with Elden Ring, isn't it like the general consensus of like the Elden Ring bros, like just use summons as the easy mode or whatever? If the game just said, like, if the game like peddled that little thing more, I mean, I don't know, I haven't even played the game. If the game told you, hey, if a boss is tough, just use more summons or whatever, and that'll be to be like, oh, if you need help, use a summon. If the game just told you that, I think that'd be fine.
Now, yes, there are ways of making the games easier. Summoning, magic, over-leveling, broken builds. There's lots of ways to completely cheese FromSoft titles that are 100% intended by the devs. I mean, the entire point of Solaire's character in Dark Souls 1 was basically the game designer screaming at you to use co-op. In Elden Ring, there was a famous online summon who would literally just solo the boss for you.
Oh, yeah. What was that dude's name? Let me solo bro or something like that. Yeah.
All of that only goes so far. It all lowers the skill floor, but even at its lowest, that floor is too high for quite a lot of people. Really, the only way...
And it's probably too high for me because I haven't even played the game yet.
...to make sure the game is beatable by absolutely everyone would be a form of easy mode. Some lower intensity option like Ghost of Tsushima has. How do I know this? Because there's a mod for Elden Ring on the Nexus forums called Easy Mode, which has 250,000 downloads. Now, my thoughts on this are pretty controversial to some, but they're also the thoughts of many hardcore Souls fans. So to share them with you...
who gives a shit? Who's it hurting? It's not hurting anybody. So who gives a shit if someone wants to play the game on easy mode?
In a way that's easy to understand, I'm going to use an analogy. Imagine you're trapped in a room with a bomb. You're stuck in there, no way out. There's an explosive device in the middle of the room. 5 minutes left in the timer, you're about to die. There's nothing you can do to run away or survive the explosion. Your only option is to try and defuse that bomb. That's what playing a Souls-like game feels like.
Really? I mean, it kind of is. I mean, if you want to call AC6 a Souls-like game, some do, some don't. I don't think I've really had a lot of rage moments. Okay, let me keep listening.
That's the feeling people are chasing when they play difficult games. You're stressed out, you're panicking, you don't know what to do, but you only have one way forward. So you start examining the explosive and figuring it out.
Okay, I will say this. This is a very, also, you have to consider, I mean, he mentioned before the skill levels of everybody. You have to consider the age of the player as well, all right? Because I will also say, when I was a younger gamer, my temperance for patience was way thinner than it is now. I am more tolerant to trialing and erroring and dying over and over and over again as an older game enjoyer versus when I was younger and was just unhinged. So there is that to take into account. So I will give him that. Yeah.
You learn which wires connect to which, and eventually you cut the right one, and you survive. The feeling of defusing a bomb in that situation would be the most euphoric, adrenaline-filled release you've ever felt.
Yeah.
And you look at anyone beating a Souls boss that was giving them trouble, and you see that same sort of feeling. People freak the fuck out when they beat these games because of that overwhelming pressure we talked about earlier, all being released. They successfully defuse the bomb. An easy mode, or any option that obviously lowers the difficulty of the game so that anyone could beat it, would be akin to putting a bomb-proof suit in that room with you.
Yeah. I mean, because what I say earlier, gamers will generally always take the path of least resistance unless they want to challenge themselves and go for the harder mode, the bragging rights, the this, the that, whatever. As far as the whole bomb thing goes, I mean, you mentioned it before, like with all the difficulty sliders of the Lara Croft game or the Tomb Raider. There was like combat difficulty, exploration, and puzzle difficulty. I mean, I don't know how many like exploration, like couldn't you apply those same things, all those little sliders to Elden Ring? I mean, I think you could, and the game would, it would be like a varying level of degree of satisfaction if you added those. Yeah, but I still don't think there's anything wrong with it. I mean, maybe I am biased because I haven't played the game yet and I haven't gone through the ringer, so I don't know.
Way to survive the explosion even if you fail to defuse it on your own. And my argument with all this is that putting on that bomb-proof suit would drastically lower the amount of adrenaline and relief you'd feel by defusing. In fact, just the knowledge that the suit is in the room with you would make defusing the bomb less satisfying, even if you never put it on, because you know it's always an option.
Yeah.
You're no longer forced to beat the system on its own terms. So that's why an easy mode would fundamentally water down the experience of playing a Souls-like for some people, even if it was an optional thing or strictly an accessible.
I mean, but isn't that essentially what an easy mode does in general to any game that has an easy mode?
Accessibility feature. Yeah, you might be thinking to yourself, you know what's worse than defusing a bomb with a bomb-proof suit on? Dying in an explosion to a bomb you couldn't defuse. I mean, obviously, I just spent the whole section talking about accessibility.
Yeah.
Some people would rather even take a watered-down experience over not being able to play at all. Case in point, the 250,000 people who installed third-party software, which is obviously not the intended experience of the game, just to make it accessible to them. So this entire argument and analogy and example really leaves us with two opposite opinions that we have to contend with. Easy mode would ruin the game. Easy mode is necessary for those who need it. Both are completely valid in their own way and have their own supporters, but they completely contradict on a fundamental level. You cannot fully agree with one without rejecting the other.
Yeah.
This, to me, is the dilemma of perfect difficulty.
I mean, so there's like an intended feeling that the dev wants you to feel after you beat a boss. Yeah. So you have to go with don't give the game an easy mode. But the dev also has to take into account that that is going to filter and funnel out a lot of people from playing the game in general. I mean, because the fact of the matter is, you know, if you bought the game, or let's say you didn't even buy the game on day one. Let's say let's say that you watch like some videos, you watch some reviewers, and everyone was like, "Oh, this game is awesome," blah blah blah, and then you buy the game. Well, then the dev already has your money. You know, it doesn't matter what you do with the game, whether you beat it or not. He already has your money. I mean, if you can get a refund on it, I mean, great, because you know what is it like? Steam is like what, 2 hours or something like that for the refund policy. But I would say for the most part, if the Elden Ring people that didn't beat the game played it longer than 2 hours but still didn't beat the game, what are you supposed to do with them? Like, are they just supposed to be like just left in purgatory or whatever, and like they're just like, oh, I'm on my 1000th attempt on this one boss or whatever, and I'm just gonna quit playing the game, and I'm so frustrated, and so on and so forth. But the dev already got my money, I can't refund it. But you know, like, that's the reality of some people. It's not like everybody. There's probably like some pie slice, you know, that affects.
And I genuinely don't know how to solve it. I don't think that you can, because you can take any game I've talked about and run into this dilemma.
Yeah.
How would you make any of them perfectly difficult? Could you implement accessibility options in Ghost of Tsushima without conflicting with a hardcore challenge? How do you stop someone playing Resident Evil 4 from feeling cheated when they learn the game has been helping them along? How would you even add a ton of challenge to overcome in a game like Stardew Valley? Like, what would you add? Taxes? Permadeath? Make everyone in the town no longer vaguely pansexual? I don't know. I think despite my efforts in this video, despite these different options and implementations I've looked at, I've run into an unavoidable brick wall. So I'll just say it. You can't perfect video game difficulty.
Yeah.
You can't make a game that gets absolutely everything right for everyone. Now, I understand if you want to...
But if you... I get it if you can't perfect it. But that is not a good reason to at least, you know, take a step forward to perfecting it. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect, but taking, you know, all the steps towards it is, I think, a good thing to do.
I'm gonna click off now because I did lie to you at the beginning of the video. I apologize. I've made a severe and continuous lapse in judgment. But unfortunately, I don't have a ukulele, so instead I'll just say this. You don't...
Oh my god, savage.
have to. No reasonable person should expect you to make a game that's perfect for everyone, that is.
Yeah.
What you should do is make a game that's perfect for the audience that'll enjoy it. Souls-like games already do this very well. Ghost of Tsushima and Hades and Resident Evil do this very well. But what you should also do is put in as much effort into that difficulty and the accessibility that comes with it as you reasonably can. Don't burn yourself out here, but definitely do not get lazy. Lazy difficulty.
Yeah, don't do the static numbers thing and make everybody have like insanely large health pools, like OP8 Borderlands, all right? And there's only like 2 guns that are viable in the damn game, all right? Get that shit out of here.
Helps nobody. It leads to long, tedious boss fights, bullshit one-hit kills, and unsatisfying gameplay. Lazy accessibility helps nobody. We're in a day and age where you can beat a prestige AAA third-person shooter with a blindfold on. You'd think Elden Ring could at least add closed captioning and a colorblind mode. The whole series' multiplayer system works entirely off of everyone being big solid colors, like, give me a fucking filter or something, come on. We've just spent a rather long time covering tons of different ways you can put a bit more effort into difficulty and challenge in your game. So while I don't expect perfection here, I'd at least appreciate a bit more thought put into newer releases. How many games could be improved by an unlockable one-hit kill mode, or a lower intensity option? How many could be improved by adding some sort of dynamic Left 4 Dead AI, or even just some basic accessibility features? We've seen that it can be done well, across both the AAA and the indie space. So honestly, I just want to hold the gaming industry to a higher standard. Just because perfection is impossible doesn't mean you shouldn't strive for it.
True.
Anyways, to at least try to deliver on the title of this video while my patron's names scroll up the side of the screen here, the perfect difficulty for me would look something like this. no difficulty options whatsoever. You boot up the game, it has easy, normal, hard built into a dynamic system like Resident Evil. You die enough times, you get booted down to easy. Do well enough, you go up to hard. Maybe even announce it like a scoring system. I think Cruelty Squad does something like that. The difficulty modes themselves would also probably be built around spawning in more enemies and items and stuff rather than toying with stats. Then within the game, I'd have some form of upgrade system where you can earn currency to buy stuff that increases or decreases the game's speed or everyone's damage, including your own. Just stuff that changes the way the game plays in a fair way. And then we add in an accessibility menu with that Ghost of Tsushima lower intensity option. I can't stress how cool that is. It just makes the game beatable for everyone in such a smart way. And then we just cram in a wall of options for visual, auditory input customization so you could play this thing blindfolded on a Guitar Hero controller if that's what works best for you. That, to me, would be the perfect difficulty system. It wouldn't work for every game, but I'd love to see something like it. If you have your own perfect difficulty system, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if you want your name in the credits like these cool people, you can get all that and more for just $1 at patreon.com/Lextorious, including a new feature, which is a custom role on my brand new Discord server. It's a public server, free for everyone and linked in the description, but patrons get a cool little badge for their support. Just wanted to shout that out. Come join, I'm pretty active there.
Nice.
Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
Dang, that was a good ass video, dude. Like, I was not expecting that. There are a couple games I haven't beaten, but I wish I could have. But I mean, like you said, the satisfactory level wouldn't have been there. So there is that. But I still would have liked to beat the damn games. But in general, yeah, just add more difficulty shit, add some accessibility shit, and for most of the games. And because I think that in general people should have the option to make the game more difficult instead of allowing players or devs to just gatekeep people from playing a game mode or game or whatever because they just can't do it. Having more people play your game is always a good thing. Like, what's the bad thing about more people playing your game? Nothing. But yeah, I like that. That was a freaking good ass video. But yeah, that's all I gotta say, really. Another good one. Yeah, and I guess I'll catch you guys in the next one. All right, peace. Later.